It was a typical Tuesday afternoon in the heart of the city. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm glow over the streets. In the middle of it all, 17-year-old Marcus Johnson, a quiet and hard-working high school senior, was walking home from school. His mind was on the upcoming finals and the college applications he still hadn't finished. Life was complicated, but Marcus was determined to keep pushing forward. As he walked down the sidewalk, he passed a group of friends hanging out by a convenience store. But before he could even reach the corner, a police officer in a patrol car slowed down and parked right beside him. The officer, Officer Randall, was known in the neighborhood for his quick judgments and harsh attitude towards anyone who didn't fit his idea of what a good citizen should look like. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Officer Randall barked, stepping out of the car. His tone was accusatory, his eyes narrowing as he looked Marcus up and down. Marcus froze for a moment, taken aback by the sudden confrontation. "Just walking home," he said, keeping his voice steady, hoping to avoid any trouble. He knew how things could escalate quickly. The officer scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Walking home, huh? And you expect me to believe that? This area has had a lot of incidents lately. Where's your ID? What's your real story?" Marcus stood tall, trying to keep his composure despite the tense situation. He could feel his pulse quicken. "I don't need to show you anything. I'm just a kid going home from school." Officer Randall was already shaking his head, muttering under his breath. "Typical. Another one of these kids thinking they can get away with whatever they want." Marcus's patience was wearing thin, but he kept his mouth shut. He didn't want to escalate things further. Just as things were about to spiral into a full-blown confrontation, a black luxury SUV pulled up behind the officer's patrol car. The door swung open, and out stepped a tall, dignified figure. Marcus' father, Councilman James Johnson, one of the most respected leaders in the city. "Randall," James said coolly, his voice sharp but measured. "What's going on here?" The officer turned, recognizing the councilman immediately, but his expression shifted from a look of authority to one of surprise and unease as he realized who he was speaking to. "Uh, Councilman Johnson," Randall stammered. "I was just asking this young man some questions." James raised an eyebrow, his gaze cold. "Asking him questions? About what, exactly?" "Well," Randall hesitated, his discomfort evident, "I thought he might be out here causing trouble." "Causing trouble?" James repeated, his voice low and controlled. "You've got some nerve, Randall. This is my son." The shock on Officer Randall's face was instant. His eyes darted between Marcus and the councilman, the weight of his earlier actions dawning on him. The officer's face turned red as he stammered an apology. "I didn't realize, sir. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean any disrespect." Marcus stood there, trying to keep his composure, but inside he felt a fire burning. This wasn't the first time he'd been judged because of the color of his skin. But today, seeing the officer so caught off guard, made him realize just how much power his father's name carried. "Don't worry about it," James said, his voice still calm but stern. "You might want to reconsider how you treat people in the future, and make sure you're not making assumptions based on appearances. You'll find that people, especially my son, don't deserve to be spoken to like that." Officer Randall shifted uncomfortably, realizing he'd made a grave mistake. He knew better than to argue, especially with someone of James's stature. With a final hesitant look at Marcus, Randall climbed back into his patrol car, his eyes downcast. The SUV roared to life and James and Marcus drove away. As they pulled away, Marcus finally let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His father's silence in the car was deafening at first, but then James spoke, his voice softening. "You okay, son?" Marcus nodded, his eyes still focused on the passing streets. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired of people treating me like I'm invisible or dangerous just because of how I look." James reached over, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You know, Marcus, some people will never understand the struggle, but you keep your head up. I'm proud of you, and nothing changes that." And in that moment, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. No matter how the world saw him, he knew who he was. And thanks to his father, he didn't have to face it alone.